I think people know by now, I am a big fan of train travel. I think it is a very good way to travel. I think it can be, again, if you have the right infrastructure and you live in the right, and again, if you are lucky enough to live in the right places in the UK, um, train travel is not only the most easiest form of travel you can do, but it's also probably the best in form of environmentally. Now, of course, expense, well, that's a completely different and separate matter. And well, many people like myself, I would certainly like to see nationalisation done, but again, I think that us as sort of progressives, we need to go start seriously going further. Okay, we want to nationalize the rail industry, but then what? You know, what you nationalize it, then what do we do? You know, um, that's the big I think stopping point I see with a lot of sort of lefties when we talk about nationalization. We go, okay, we're going to nationalize the rail industry. Then what? You know, I think we need to start pushing beyond that then what argument. And of course, there are lots of arguments, for in favor, and of course, there are those against those as well. And of course, we are going to have to come up with arguments for those that are against, nationalizing the rail industry. And we have in the UK, and putting forward the positives and showing that we not only just have the policy of yes, we're going to nationalize the rail industry, but then after that as well. So I am very skeptical, though, however, of Truss coming out very recently and saying that she's going to revitalize Northern Powerhouse Rail. Bear in mind, of course, this was one of the big promises that Boris Johnson was going to deliver during levelling up. And of course, as we saw, it got absolutely the trash. This promise of building all this new track, having all these new trains, basically now at the moment amounts to a tiny upgrade of a small section of track. And to be honest, it's nowhere near enough of the crying out for desperate need of rail infrastructure that the North needs in order to really get it going. So I am not convinced that Truss is actually serious about the promises that she's making about Northern Powerhouse Rail. I am very much convinced this is a desperate move to try and win over those Northern Tory votes. So let's go diving into this and find out what's been happening here recently. Then, of course, before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And, of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And, as always, there is the YouTube subscription, the Pony Club, where you can join as well. And, of course, the YouTube thank you button as down below as well. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And now, of course, on with the show. Off we go over to the Yorkshire bylines today, with their take on this as well, of Truss tries to win over the Northern Tories with Northern Powerhouse Rail promises. There has been much talk recently about levelling up. And of course, talk is cheap. There is therefore an important to actually study the actual figures on the government spending per head. These were recently published and repeatedly researched by a group called IPPR North and reported in the Yorkshire Post. The data revealed that in 2021, the region with the lowest spending was Yorkshire and the Humber. Not a surprise there. As we've said, levelling up, not going to happen. Where, of course, only £11,500 was actually spent, and of course, the national average was over £16,300. And of course, in London, that figure was £19,231. And London was also the region with the biggest increase. Simply put, each person in Yorkshire and the Humber is having tax taken out of their pockets to spend in the south, and there is almost over £8,000 disparity in the spending per head between the capital and our region. What is happening is a transfer of resources out of the most needy parts of the country and towards the most affluent. That is levelling down, not levelling up. The stark contrast between the lives in the different parts of the UK can be seen by anyone who takes the trouble to visit the neglected communities in the north and the more prosperous ones in the south. Consider, for instance, the difference between life in Bradford in Yorkshire and Bradford-on-Avon in Somerset. Two places that might share a name, but they don't share many other experiences. Bradford-on-Avon is a town of golden stone, where it is a pleasure to walk through the quiet, well-kept streets of affluent housing, and Bradford in Yorkshire has some of the most deprived streets in the country, and much of its housing is crumbling into ruin. There are, of course, pockets of poverty in Bradford-on-Avon, and of course, there are real problems over young people, how they can afford the local housing, or even the precision of care that will be familiar to people from other regions. There are also places in Bradford, Yorkshire that buck the trend and do offer, again, the designer living, such as the Saltaire Village. Nevertheless, it is important to escape the conclusion that if you ask people who have been brought up in these different locations to change places for a week, they would be shocked by the difference in life experiences. The chances of succeeding in a local school in Bradford are massively lower than the chances of succeeding in Bradford-on-Avon. And health problems are acutely worse in the Yorkshire city than they are in Somerset, the rural town where people can expect to live 2 years longer in the south than in the north. With the administrative district of Bradford, there are areas, and very likely the one of Addington, where they are very, very affluent. Then, of course, the difference between the life expectancy for men and of those rural, affluent, and poorest areas of people in the district of Bradford is 9.1 years for men, and for women, it is 8.0. Data like that makes the extent of needed for levelling up dramatically clear. But instead of seeking to actually fix that problem, the Conservative government has chosen to use such poverty as an opportunity for cheap soundbite slogans that make it sound like they care deeply about those issues and have never been accompanied by a single, instead being accompanied by the very cynical neglect. And yeah, that's what we've really seen. If Liz Truss is really the continuity Johnson, then yeah, leveling up's not going to happen. These promises for Powerhouse Rail, not going to happen. Again, skeptical, shall we say? I'll be very surprised if they actually go through with it. But again, if they do go through with it, great, because it's a massive infrastructure opportunity. And sometimes, hey, you've got to give credit where credit is given sometimes. But again, I am highly, highly skeptical that Liz Truss is actually going to go through with Powerhouse Rail. So, the one scheme that the government came up with for raising the economic prosperity of the whole of the Bradford area was Northern Powerhouse Rail Scheme. And that came with it much better rail links for Bradford to Manchester and Leeds, and with a proper station instead of the two crumbling stations that currently disgrace the city and represent the worst public transport links in any major city in the country. Again, if you've ever been through those two Bradford stations, you know how bad they are. Boris Johnson instead chose to scrap that idea, and under the influence of his Chancellor Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss has now recognised the opportunity to score a very cheap soundbite that may help her become Prime Minister. She has announced that if she wins the Tory leadership contest, she will restore the Northern Powerhouse Rail Scheme, and Bradford will get its station, just as she announced the wonderful new tax reductions, cheaper petrol, and anything else she thinks that will get her elected. What she hasn't done, of course, is produce a costed plan for delivering her string of promises. What she hasn't done, again, is explain how people with mortgages will cope when her policies produce a huge rise in payments. And what she hasn't done is actually implement any levelling up policies whilst in government. It would be wonderful to be able to trust her word and to see the Northern Powerhouse Rail Scheme actually come to fruition and to genuinely drive for levelling up to be at the heart of government. It would also be wonderful if pigs could fly. If we are about to replace one cynical lying Prime Minister with another, one that is further to the right than even most bonkers and even more bonkers and unreliable, the people of Bradford and the rest of the North would be well advised to study the rest of the past promises on levelling up before they place their faith in any new ones. This government that levels down whilst talking about levelling up. Yeah. And I'm very skeptical as well. I've said before, I think I'm very lucky with living where I am. I've sort of won the rail jackpots in a way. I've got sort of very, very good rail links to sort of where I am. Like you say, I can get to Leeds, I can get to Sheffield very easily, and then from those two sort of big rail hubs, I can get to sort of anywhere I want, really. Again, I'm very, very lucky in that regard, but there are other people who live throughout the rest of Yorkshire who aren't so lucky, who do not have those good rail links. And it is a massive opportunity to seriously level up the country. And yet you'd think, given the fact that they won such a massive majority based on that promise up in the north, taking so many of those seats, maybe they would actually even fulfill those promises, but they're not even sort of fulfilling it in any like token way. Instead, as we've seen there from the clear figures, they are taking money from the people of the north and putting it down south by an almost £8,000 difference. That should be shocking more to anyone, and really goes to show you that these promises on levelling up under Truss are not going to be kept at all. At all. I will be highly skeptical if this suddenly comes back roaring into life, but I am definitely not predicting this is going to happen. I am definitely not predicting this is going to happen. If it happens, great, good, but I do not think it will happen. I will be very skeptical. But if you think otherwise, please do let me know down below. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, there is the YouTube subscription button as well. We can join the Pony Club. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.